Hello, I'm Jeff Schaefer, and welcome to another podcast. Today, we have the opportunity to hear from Evelyn Lemly, previous president of CMCA, but actively leading the efforts for the last 13 years at Kairos Ministry. You're going to hear the power of correctional ministry and chaplaincy, not only how it impacts men and women who are incarcerated, but also their families and volunteers. Enjoy. Evelyn, I appreciate you driving. How long did it take you? All of
30 minutes.
30 minutes.
Yeah.
So we are in Central Florida. And so you are located where?
Our international headquarters is in DeBerry, Florida, which is about 30 minutes north of here. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming down. I've been very much looking forward to, obviously I know you, but to interviewing you here. Give us a little bit of background so that our listeners can understand how you come to this discussion or what you bring to this discussion.
For the past 13 years, I've been the CEO of Kairos Prison Ministry International and also very active in CMCA and working on the board and advisory board. And I was the president for 3 years and have done several different positions. But, my goal is to be engaged in the industry that I'm operating in for my own learning. Before that, I was working in a couple other ministries that started in 2003. Prior to that, I was actually in the corporate world and had several different positions throughout some major businesses and industries that God allowed me then to use what he taught me into the nonprofit ministry world.
What drew you to correctional ministry and specifically Kairos?
Well, Kairos was, they recruited me and candidly, when we started this, I was like, I don't know anything about prison ministry. And so I was a little bit apprehensive of why do I feel called to take this role? Why do I feel called to accept this? But God was making it very clear in my life that he was putting an opportunity before me to lead this ministry that was obviously special to him because we've been around 50 years, but also to maybe use my gifting and talents that he's given me in order to lead this ministry. So my first inclination is no, that I don't know anything. And it was very obvious that he was saying, but this is where I'm calling you to serve.
You took the position. How has it been what you thought it would be or not thought it would be? Less about the role, but more about the overarching correctional ministry.
Well, yeah, because I came in as a novice. I mean, probably still am for that matter, but I came in knowing nothing. Sometimes I think that's an advantage, though, because you come in without any preconceived notions of what it is or is not. Yeah, a little apprehension, even like most volunteers come into of, you want me to go do what, where? So there's certainly that. But what I found was it's just like everywhere else in the world, there's hurting people that need God's love. And obviously working in the correctional ministry cycle, we have the impact on those that's incarcerated, those that's the youth that's incarcerated or waiting on incarceration and that life, on the family members, on the women that's sitting, at home and feeling isolated and alone. So there's this huge group of people that often get ignored. So I very quickly sort of became very passionate about the need to serve those that's impacted by incarceration in the whole correctional ministry world, because it's often a forgotten mission field.
What does Kairos do? And if I were to come along and join you, what would I experience?
To give you the big picture, Kairos is made up of 3 programs. We have a program where we work inside men and women's prisons. We have a youth program where we work in youth facilities called Kairos Torch, and then we work with the women of the incarcerated. So we try to make that family impact. We look a great deal at the importance of belonging, because God made us all to be in relationship, first with him and with one another. There's a lot of isolation in the correctional ministry world. We work and focus a lot on God's love, on God's forgiveness. And the point is to take people on a journey that puts them into a process of where they are healing so that they actually feel worthy of God's love in the first place. So I could give probably a million stories, but this one comes to mind, and it sort of demonstrates that sense of belonging. You may or may not know, in prisons, there are a lot of gang-related groupings that are there. Again, people wanting to belong to something. Well, we want them in God's gang, not in the gang of that's doing other stuff. And so we always are looking to bring negative leaders from the prison into our program. Because if we just get those that's already going to the chapel, well, you're not making a difference in the actual environment in the facility. So bringing in those negative leaders. So we're always encouraging, bring us, some of the gang leaders, bring us those guys that are out of control. We want them. So I remember at the last event of our weekend, our 3.5-day cycle of an intense program that we take them through, there was actually a Aryan brother and a skinhead that was both the leaders of those two gangs that was actually on the weekend. And at the end of that program, they were standing in front of the room with their arms around each other saying, "We are not at war anymore." And that's only the power of God showing that there can be reconciliation, there can be forgiveness, there can be finding those like things instead of that hate that we so often teach. And so there's so many stories like that can be shared, but that's only God could do that.
In that story, how dangerous was it for them to get up and do that and say that?
Well, there's several different things that happen there if you think about it, because when the one guy, to illustrate that a little bit more, the one man was standing up speaking because we give them an opportunity to share. And he looks at the other one and he points and says, "You, get up here." Well, obviously the correctional officers in the room sort of went a little tense because they knew who these people were. But the danger to them is when they go back on the yard, because all of a sudden they're getting along. But as the leaders, everyone else follows those. So imagine seeing a person that's been a very negative behavior, not doing the right things, all of a sudden comes out and they're a totally different person. They're not beating up people or worse or different things. They're actually stopping the fights, or they're not at war anymore with that gang. Can it happen? Yes, we've seen it happen. Do we know that it's a danger? Absolutely. We hear stories like that all the time, but the point is we don't want to we want to change the individual, but we also want to change the community that they're in.
Nonprofits, business, whatever, it's oftentimes, and what's a good thing, it's let's define success, let's measure success. It tends to be a numbers game, which I think part of that is healthy and then part of it isn't. How does Kairos think about what success looks like, and do you all track that? And really, we're trying to illustrate that this stuff works.
There's lots of things. I mean, I still believe that testimonies are one of the most critical parts of a life changed, right? Because that's what we're after, an impact on a person. We're talking about God's people here, to not turn them immediately into a stat, but to actually look at that. So we do a lot of testimonies from wardens, testimonies from chaplains, testimonies from the individuals that's gone through our programs, and of course then our volunteers, because all of those factors are changing, and we see changes in the facility, we see changes in the individuals, et cetera, and changes in ourselves as the people who are doing the program. So that's one. But then we do also try to track stats. We look at attendance, we look at difference of impact based off of how we've run the program. You're always trying to fine tune your operations, but then we also look at recidivism data, and we can actually show that our recidivism goes somewhere between 40 and 50% down compared to their state numbers or the facility numbers.
And then everything that Kairos does, is it all while they're incarcerated, or do you have something post-release?
No, we do everything while they're incarcerated because we actually believe that reentry needs to start the day they get in, not the day they get out. So if they don't have a program that's helping them change their behavior and changing their mindset while they're in there, their chances of getting out and being successful goes down dramatically. So our role in that is while they're in. But then our other side of that is the fact that we work with the women of the incarcerated. And by working with their wives, their mothers, their daughters, their sisters, their aunts, their grandmother, the women that are in their lives, because they're out there trying to run the family unit. They're taking care of everything else while their family member is inside. And so by working with them, we also see a family reconciliation. Well, think about how important it is to have a place to go when you get out. The more we can get a family reconciliation, then the better chances they have of being successful. That's a key part of having a home to go to, a family to go to, having a connection with your family. And so we hear stories all the time. For example, there was this one man who had been in for 20 years, had not talked to his son for 15. Absolutely disconnected. And it was on both parts and things. He went through our program and he reached out to his son. And now him and his son are talking. He is now since out and had a family unit to go back to. And it was just a beautiful thing from a totally broken family relationship because of what he had done to reconciliation and now a healthy family unit that's living and supporting one another.
Beautiful. Give us a little insight if it's a girlfriend or a spouse or whatever. Give us a little insight of what a woman like that goes through while their significant other is incarcerated. I mean, I can piece stuff together, but
Sure.
But you've seen it. What are things like, oh yeah, I may not have realized that?
Well, I would probably say the number one thing that we deal with is isolation, and probably followed closely by anger. Most of the women that have someone incarcerated, it's isolation because no one knows. They go to work, they go to their church, or they go to their community or wherever it is, and people don't go up and go, oh, guess where my husband is, or guess where my son is. It's a very internal crisis, if you will. And so they hold that in. They don't go to work and tell everybody where their family member is or that they have someone incarcerated. So it becomes a very lonely, isolated situation. And part of that is because of the stigma, because people automatically assume you must be a bad person if you've got a family member that, or things of that. So that isolation. Most of them will tell us that we feel like we're incarcerated right alongside with them. It's just our bars are not present. And so that isolation, that being alone, having to carry the family burden, all of those different components become very, very prominent in their life. Sometimes the fact that someone is incarcerated is where the anger comes from, and sometimes it's because of the life situation that they're angry. But either way, there's an anger that happens. There's a disappointment and a frustration. And so we're dealing with that of trying to give people hope and worthiness, and that they're not alone, because we also create groups of people that they can talk to that's in the same situation. And that gives great comfort when you realize, oh, I don't have to be alone. There's other people dealing with these same situations.
What do you think these women would say, specifically as it relates to about what you all do? And I'm asking what you all do just because you know it intimately. I mean, I would think if they see a change, it's got to be huge for them to actually go, oh my gosh, my husband, my boyfriend has radically changed, versus, let me be skeptical, the guy behind bars says, I've changed.
Right.
So do you get that anecdotal, do you get real data from these women that go, no, they're different?
The way I would describe that is we definitely get people saying, whatever you did, thank you. I mean, we get letters that's literally what it says. But what we do is, we allow the men and the women that are inside, and the youth for that matter, to sponsor, represent their female loved one to go through our program. It's free, but they can sign them up. One of the things that we see happening is that the women start feeling their loved one on the inside. They're like, whatever you did, and they'll call them on Sunday and go, oh, I went through this great program and this is what it did, and they start talking about it, and oh, by the way, I signed you up, and they're usually like, I'm not going, and all this. But when they hear more and more and they see more and more, and they're actually going, this person really is different, my husband, my son, my brother, whatever the relation is, and they start feeling that, they're like, I need to do this. It becomes a parallel experience if we can have both, and think about it when, especially if they don't know Christ in the first place. So we all know the impact of Jesus Christ in our lives. But until you know that, you don't know it. It's a powerful thing then to bring people into it's okay to forgive. It's okay to love. It's okay to know hope, and to see that there is, even in this bad situation, a light in that darkness. And that's what we're trying to show them.
Well, you bring up an interesting point that I can imagine, because I'll talk to people and I say, hey, I'll go in and do some prison work or whatever. And it's like, well, do you trust these guys, what they're saying? Well, I'm assuming the mom, the spouse is asking the same questions. And so what you just described says, yeah, we're actually going to take you through that journey with them, so that they don't just show up one day and go, hey, I've changed. And like, yeah, right. I've heard that 20 times already.
Well, through phone calls and their own interaction, of communication, they can see it. They've known these people for a while. If it's your brother, well, you grew up with them, you're going to know it, or your spouse, or different things. So there's that component, but there's also the component of sometimes it is a very broken family. They have not talked. And so when someone starts reaching back, I'm sure that in a lot of cases, it's like, okay, what are you wanting?
Right.
There's that caution component. But when they see that what they want is a relationship, I'm not asking you for anything. And a lot of times they're calling them to say, I need to ask for your forgiveness. That just fast forwards a broken relationship. And if it's sincere, and then they're demonstrating it. So that's part of it, is actually getting to that point of healing. And you really can't heal if you don't have forgiveness.
Do you, and I don't want to get academic here, but I'm going to act like I'm an academic here. Do you have a theory of change, or do you guys talk? I mean, how do you all think about these individuals changing?
Well, first of all, we know that the change agent is Jesus Christ, okay? We just show up and be his hands and feet. But I think our focus of our theory, if you will,
Sure,
to put it into that, well, we're a behavior modification program, and all of those disciplines of the science related to behavior modification certainly fits into everything that we do, but we really do it from a biblical standpoint. And so I think our theory is really focusing on that forgiveness, so that people can get themselves out of a dark place and actually see potential and opportunities. And we've just found, if we can't get them to the point of at least starting to deal with forgiveness, sometimes it's of themselves, right? Sometimes it's of other people, that chance of healing and going to the next step sometimes gets thwarted. But it all comes back to that belonging, that anger management, that trauma management, all of those different things, because that's the culmination of getting to forgiveness, is when you can let go of those type things. I didn't say forget, but let go that they're not your control agents.
Forgiveness, as you just mentioned, obviously is unbelievably powerful. And I was in Rwanda probably 5 years ago. And if you know the story of Rwanda, the genocide, I was with he's probably 35 at the time. And so he was like 7, I think. And his best friend, so another 7-year-old, it was his dad that murdered the first 7-year-old's dad. So I asked him, obviously this was 30 some years ago. So I asked him, I said, if you could talk to America, what would you say? And he said a couple things, but I want to piggyback because I think it's wisdom, but it's hard to do. He said, he said 2 things. Don't think this can't happen to you, meaning don't think you can't get enough anger going and that you're going to have a genocide of some sort. But the second thing is, he said, you have to learn to forgive, which is exactly what you just said. And you're like, wait, you had to forgive your best friend because his dad murdered your dad. And that was in the back of a taxi driving up in these mountains. And you go, how simple at one level and how profound. And here you are, we're sitting this today and talking about men and women incarcerated. And at the core of it is forgiveness.
And of course, to forgive, you got to own it.
Yep.
Right? Whatever it is, what you did, what someone else did, what you perceive was done, why you're in this situation, who was involved. I mean, it just goes on and on. It becomes this litany. And part of it, I find that sometimes incarcerated people, it's everyone else's fault. And until they can own it, it's very hard to forgive or to seek forgiveness. And so to forgive yourself, you have to admit that you did something, right? So we're very, very intentional. And every one of our programs, all 3 of them, have a forgiveness ceremony where we intentionally are trying to deal with, you got to let that go so you can heal and move forward. And recognizing that the ultimate forgiveness is through Jesus Christ. And so we're constantly trying to combine those to bring it into God's love and God's forgiveness.
I remember probably 15 years ago or before that, really questioning, can people really change? And I'm just talking about myself, my coworker, my family. And so the skeptic could be looking and saying, Evelyn, these people are criminals. They can't really change. What do you say to that?
First of all, with God, all things are possible. That would be my first answer. But what I find that we as society, and I probably came into this role thinking this too, that we sort of paint all people that are in prison or in jail with a broad brush. And they're all the horrific person, that's done 50 million different things, and we could all put a label on it of some kind. And the honest answer is, most people that's in prison look a great deal like you and I, and they made a mistake of some kind. I didn't say it was a good mistake by any means. Sometimes it was intentional. Sometimes it was horrific, right? Sometimes it was you get in and you're trapped into doing something, the drug trade or different things like that. So yes, do we have to choose to change? Of course we do. It doesn't just happen usually. If we're really talking about behavior modification, then it's choosing to behave differently. Right? And we choose to behave differently because we see that there's another way and a better way to behave. We work a lot with youth, and what we find a lot with youth is they're dealing with abandonment, anger, and abuse. The 3 A's: abandonment, anger, and abuse. And which comes first? Well, that's debatable sometimes. And so a lot of times they're acting out to get attention. Sometimes that changing that trajectory of their behavior is the goal, so that they're actually seeing that there is another path to go down. You do not have to go down this path. There's a way to get positive attention. There's a way to have a positive life. There's a way to have a true life plan of how you're going to live this out, and don't stay on this path. Yeah, I hear all the things about, don't try to change your spouse and all this other stuff. And that's true, because only the individual can change, and only Jesus Christ can actually lead you through that. And that's why it's so important that we're a Christian ministry.
I posed the question, but I'll also reaffirm, because I've been doing this long enough as well. Sure, people can backslide and not be sincere. I couldn't do what I do, and I don't do this full time. You do it full time. So you could speak this even with more profound than I can. But the change that I have personally seen in the lives of some of these men and women actually gives me more hope than maybe what I see at times outside the prison walls. So in fact, people ask me, why do you, what's the rationale? Why do you do this? And I've got multiple answers, and this isn't about me, but I will say, it's inspiring to see and to watch the transformation in some of these men and women, and actually a lot of them. So let me be, and obviously it's got to be what you see. Otherwise, I don't know how you do what you do.
I guess we could think about it from several different standpoints. One is, when do you see the most change in your life? It's usually when you're at your lowest point. Well, if you're in prison, you're pretty much at your lowest point. And again, but you've got an opportunity of, when are you going to change this? How are you going to behave while you're there? Are you going to become a better criminal, or are you going to become a better person in your society, community, right where you're at, and when you get out? Because see, I want to see them be a better person while they're in there.
Yeah.
Right? Because then they get a better chance when they get out. You can sort of look at it from that standpoint of, a lot of times we learn the most when we're in our deepest, darkest places. And so from that standpoint, you can say, well, it's a pretty good place to be ministering, because they need a hope and an opportunity to think about things in a whole different way versus maybe what they're surrounded with. And in a lot of cases, once people own what they've done and they get to that point, we hear the same aspirations that you and I have, and that anyone has, of, well, I just wanted to be a good dad, or I just wanted to be a good husband, or I just wanted to do this. And I got caught up, or out of anger, I did this, or out of, spite, or sometimes evil even, I did X, Y, and Z, whatever the crime was, that inner part of how God made us also starts coming out. So one of the most exciting things I see sometimes is these individuals that are going back into their community that they came out of and making a profound difference. They're opening churches. They're an ordained pastor, and they're a pastor, and they're going back into their community that was maybe a rough community, and they're bringing these kids in, and they're doing dramatic things. And we're seeing this all over the country in some of these inner cities and different places. And some of the fastest growing churches are run by former inmates. I mean, who would have thought? But isn't that just like
that's
God?
God's economy. Yes, it is.
He seems to take the least and make them the greatest. So it sort of fits with all of his scriptural teaching of, how he uses us all in our different ways. And so I think sometimes it's, we talk about second chances and third chances, and don't we think, oh, praise God that you gave me another chance. And I think sometimes we as society needs to give people another chance to show that maybe they're not the person that put them where they're at.
Mm-hmm. So as we explore this idea of just the power of the gospel, but the power for people to change, the power of correctional ministry and chaplaincy, come at it from a different angle. So how many volunteers do you all have, or whatever, however you say that appropriately?
Yeah, Kairos Prison Ministry in the U.S. alone has over 30,000 volunteers operating.
Which has got to be one of the largest armies out there.
as far as I know, we're the largest volunteer
Yeah.
army that there is. Yes.
I'm going to be skeptical, which I do believe you, but let me be skeptical about stuff you've said.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming if these volunteers are changed themselves, that's another angle to go, this stuff is real.
Right.
What's been your experience? What would volunteers say? Give us some of the insights.
Right. No, that's it. Very, very true. And we of course talk to our volunteers all the time. And we hear everything from I've become a better dad, a better grandfather, a better husband. We hear all of that from our volunteers. It's really hard not to change when you see someone else changing in front of your eyes, so to speak, and you hear the stories of change. As you're mentoring and working with other individuals, and you see the light come on. And I'm talking about the understanding light, but then also the power of Jesus Christ in their lives. It's really hard for you not to change. And so I think our faith grows stronger. I think our trust in the Lord grows stronger. I think how we then behave becomes stronger. It's also very hard to try to model how things should be and it not become a part of who you are. And so by default, I think that's part of it. But the other angle of that I hear is from pastors who will say, when I have a person that has participated in your ministry, they come back as a better volunteer in my church. They have a better testimony. They have a better heart. They have a stronger will to serve. They become more active because, when you see things happening, you just want to share it. You want to do it more. So they become more active with us. They become more active in the church, and you start seeing them climb into other positions. We have tons of volunteers that now have gone back and got their pastor, license or ordained. They become ordained chaplains through various programs, and now they're serving in various ways, not only within prisons, but in other needs, hospitals and different things when they get their credentials. So, it's sort of exactly what we're trying to do with those that's incarcerated. We all of a sudden want to improve ourselves for the glory of God, that is.
Do you have a favorite story of a volunteer?
Well, ironically, probably some of my favorite stories of volunteers are from people who were inside and now they're outside. Mm-hmm. We have a man, I'll just leave him generic.
Sure.
That went through our program several years ago as an incarcerated person, and he was not supposed to get out. But he dramatically changed. His behavior changed. His participation in things within the prison changed, and he did get parole. Well, he is now a volunteer. He is now a chaplain, an ordained chaplain, and he actually serves in the prison that he was in. Now, do you think people that was there, because there's a lot of people still there that knew him before, and do you think they've seen the difference in who he is now? And as a matter of fact, one of the people who brought him to the Lord, which was another inmate years ago, he actually was able to recently baptize them as their chaplain. So how's that for full circle stories?
That's a good story.
So, you start seeing things like that. So, but as a volunteer, what we literally see is people who will say, well, I was sort of a part-time Christian. I went to church when it was convenient. I did this, we play at it sometimes, and we're all guilty of that from time to time. But, they actually become much more intentional with their walk. They actually are changing their behaviors, their involvement in their church, their involvement in their community, their involvement in their family. Their priorities change.
I think for many, you view the prison as all darkness. And there's definitely darkness there, but there's light in there too. And that is, the word is going through the ducts. to these new entrants. That's pretty powerful. So let me change the gears on you a little bit here, and because this is really part of my passion is. So I'm going to play a hypothetical game with you, and you can pick whatever number you want. But and I want you to answer this question not just from a Kairos standpoint, but given what you've done in CMCA, given what you have of this whole space, if God were to bless you with, I don't care if it's 10 million, I don't care if it's $20 million. I just want to know, like, where would you put those resources today if you want to make a difference, a meaningful difference in correctional ministry and chaplaincy? And by your answer, you're not diminishing anything else. I want to try to inspire people of like, this is where needs are. This is where we need to get capital. This is where to get people going to. So I'll be quiet. Any thoughts on how you'd answer that?
We have prisons and youth facilities around the world that is begging us to come in. We've got more opportunity than we have people and resources. So my answer from a Kairos standpoint is I would do more of what we're doing because now we have the resources to not only from a funding standpoint, but to hopefully attract the people. From a correctional ministry.
Could I stop you 1 second?
Sure.
So I'm going to give a number. If you had $10 million, could you actually effectively deploy it fairly quickly?
If I had $10 million today, I could probably have it deployed within a couple of years.
Wow.
Of getting out there and into more facilities. I mean, right now we have 100 youth facilities that's asking for us to bring the program in, and we don't have the people and the resources to do it.
I don't want to hear that, but I do want to hear that because, and look, there's more to life than money, but money and people. I mean, you just said you have 100 of these facilities. That's just in one channel.
That's just for the youth. That's just the youth facilities.
Yeah.
If I had to speak, and I would include Kairos in this, of course, but for the correctional ministries, to get the churches and the people in the churches to understand the importance of this mission field that's setting in their backyard, I would deploy part of the resources there to say what Jesus said in Matthew is real here of go visit them in prison. The needs of these individuals and to get them to better understand the impact on their community. If we could actually reach those, not just in prison, but to remember their families. I mean, there's some data out there that says there's 131 million people that have been directly impacted by incarceration in the United States. That's a third of the population. Okay, so, and that's just adults. That doesn't include the children. So to understand the importance of this impact on our society and the difference of how we as Christians, as the church, could make a profound difference on this and maybe even break the cycle of incarceration that we're in is huge. So from a correctional ministry standpoint, trying to get the word out of the need would be where I would go on a big picture.
I 100% agree with you. And I also agree with you because this is the way God works. He takes, and I'm using earthly terms, he takes the lowest of the low to transform. I don't view them as lowest of low, but he flips, his economy is upside down. And I also know, because I've personally lived it, my wife has lived it, our lives have been changed by men and women who have criminal backgrounds and have been incarcerated. And I know that it can massively could change the United States.
Well, if we think about it, again, when people have come from a very low place, a very bad place, a very dark place in their life, even if they knew Christ at the time, or if they didn't, and all of a sudden you see in your own life what can happen, you can't hold it in. You just can't. Mm-hmm. And so the profound change that are happening, there's a lot of people that believe revival is coming out of the prisons because there's a lot of people that are getting out that is making a huge difference in our society. And unfortunately, what we hear from a news standpoint is Everyone is evil and everybody's going back in because they just get out and do it again. And that's not the real whole story. That's just a piece of the story. That's the negative side of the story instead of the story of those that are getting out and are making a difference, starting with their family, starting with their community, starting with their church. And there are thousands of them.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot. Well, one other specific question to follow up. So if it's this awareness, and if you had this money, what do you think are some of the most impactful ways to practically do that?
Yeah, well, if I had that magic answer,
right.
we probably would have already done it. I mean,
so let's assume there isn't a answer, but let's just assume that there are a number of levers to be pulled.
Right.
What would be a couple levers that you would go, let's pull that lever?
Right. Gosh, I am always a seeing is believing. If I had, my magic wand and I would take more people to see it. And even if they weren't participating fully, to see the change, getting more people to speak in the churches that have been there and sharing their story. A story, a testimony is worth 1,000. I can say it all day long, but when you hear the true stories, it makes a huge impact. So, but I think people have such a false impression of the prison itself. And the people that are there, getting more exposure and understanding of that and breaking down part of that fear so that they want to serve there. But remembering all of those others, if there's 2 million people that's incarcerated at any point in time, but there's 131 million in the US, well, there's a bigger audience sitting out here in our neighbor and in the pew next to us, or not in the church, that we need to be reaching out to, and understanding that there's a hurting part of our world out here that, for the most part, we're ignoring. And what could happen if we actually change that? So I think building that awareness within the church body, and I'm talking about believers in general. Not a specific church or a one denomination. I'm talking about the church, the body of Christ, actually understanding that there is a third of our population hurting out here and being ignored because of our fear, instead of believing that Jesus Christ can make a difference. Let's go get them.
Thank you for what you're doing. I know that there is amazing transformation you see. But I also know it's not easy. And so thank you for the inspiration as I've gotten to know you over the last several years and see what you do. I'm praying for you. I'm cheering for you. I don't know why this comes to mind, but I'll just share it. So I was up in Spartanburg. In fact, you know this individual. I was at Soteria. And I was able to go, I saw a number of things, but one of the things that I just can't get out of my head is I saw the woodworking shop. You probably know this, but one of the things they do is they actually rip down they get paid to rip down old homes and effectively recycle as much as they can. And so they take this wood that normally we would just throw in dumpsters or whatever, throw in in all these landfills. And they bring it to their shop, clean it up. And then I got to see the guys working on it, but then I also got to see some of the finished product. It's absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. It's old wood that's been restored. And that just gives me a picture, a visual of frankly, what God does for all of us. But then to see these men and the delight as they are working through this process to create beauty. I mean, you talk about touching and inspiring. So I view what you're doing is you get to play a part in transforming and crafting with your volunteers and Christ and the Holy Spirit, something that was broken, like us all, to something that is beautiful. Still got its nicks and marks, but that's half the reason why it's so beautiful. Anyways, I share that because I literally have a big Jenga set that I've got to make sure I write a check for in my, actually I left it out at we have some property. And I wanted to get it just as a reminder to support, but then as a reminder of, oh my gosh, here's this wood that was transformed from was going to be thrown away, and now it's something of beauty. And I think that's exactly what you're doing.
It is a privilege to be the hands and feet of Christ as we're doing it, because it's Him that shapes that, but we get to be a part. And that's, I think, what we're all called to do. So I invite everybody to come join in. There's work to be done.
So Evelyn, you mentioned this idea of showing up, volunteering, whatever. So how does somebody do that? Whether it's with Kairos or others?
Well, if it's with Kairos, you can go to our website, kairosprisonministry.org, and we have plenty of ways that you can sign up. And I would also put a plug, if you have been impacted by incarceration and a woman, you can sign up to be a guest on our program. We also always need donations, so you can participate there. And then we have churches that participate in many different ways. We get the youth program involved with making placemats and sending in letters. And we also, prayervigils.net is where everybody signs up for prayer. So covering us in prayer, because every one of our events, which we do 800 plus a year, is covered 24/7 in prayer. So there's so many different ways to be involved, even without going in yourself. And if Kairos is not for you, then you go on the CMCA website and find a different ministry, or call and say, here's what I'm interested in, and I'll help get you connected. There's plenty of work for everyone, and we're all in this journey together trying to make an impact, whether it's from the side to victims to all the way to reentry back into the society and everything in between. So there's tons of programs and ministries that need your help.
Great. You know, in my earlier career, I was a psych major and a biblical studies major. And so one of the things I would pontificate, not that I'm that smart, trying to figure out all these hard theological, doctrinal issues. What I love about correctional ministry is you don't really need to understand all the theology and the doctrine. You see it played out in real life.
Right.
So for all those questioners, put me in the middle there. You walk away from there and you're like, I don't need to question anymore.
Part of it is just showing up and showing somebody cares. It's in the world of corrections, that is huge. Absolutely huge. And I don't care whether it's a youth facility, a women's prison, a men's prison, those people who are isolated, that's the family members, just knowing someone cares. And they're not just a number or a victim of circumstance or whatever the situations are, but that actually somebody cares. So just showing up is, I would probably say, 90% of the battle.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. Which is amazing, because at one level, it's so simple, but so hard.
Very
well,
true.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Thank you.
Love to get to know you and your story a little bit better.
Thank you for having me.